My name is Linda Karishma, and I'm 31 years old. Even as I say that out loud, my hands feel a little shaky. 31 sounds like an age where you're supposed to be settled, sure of who you are, past the point of crying over Christmases you didn't get invited to. But some stories don't stay in the past, no matter how many promotions you get or how nice your apartment is. They sit in your chest like a splinter you've learned to breathe around. And every December, mine starts to ache. I grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona, one of those polished desert suburbs where every stucco house looks like a magazine spread, and the landscaping budget could probably pay off someone else's student loans. Our house had 5 bedrooms, more space than a family of 4 could ever actually need. There was me, my older brother, Cameron, and our parents, Gerald and Patricia Karishma. On paper, we were perfect. Dad was the chief financial officer of a major pharmaceutical corporation. That meant Italian suits, business trips, and late-night phone calls, where he said things like acquisitions and market share while swirling a glass of scotch. Mom used to run a lifestyle blog with a decent following, back when people still said blogger like it was a full job title. By the time I came along, she'd traded sponsored posts for charity luncheons, board memberships, and being photographed at galas with a champagne flute in her hand. And then there was Cameron, 4 years older. From my earliest memories, it was clear that he wasn't just the firstborn, he was the son our family orbited. It looked like this. The walls of our house were practically wallpapered with Cameron's achievements. Basketball trophies lined up in chronological order, Model UN certificates framed in brushed metal, National Honor Society plaques, academic excellence awards, team photos. It was like living in a shrine to his potential. My achievements? They existed too, just not in the parts of the house anyone saw. Mine were shoved into a cardboard box in the garage, right next to the dusty Christmas decorations nobody bothered to put up anymore. When I was little, I used to open that box and trace my own name on ribbons and certificates, just to prove to myself that I had done something. The first time I realized I was extra in my own family's story was on my 10th birthday. I remember waking up that morning vibrating with excitement. Double digits. It felt huge. I had this silly fantasy that Mom would wake me up with pancakes, or Dad would at least say, "Happy birthday, kiddo," before he checked his emails. Instead, I came downstairs to find them in the kitchen, locked in a tense debate about basketball shoes. "I'm telling you, the Nikes have better ankle support," Dad insisted, scrolling on his phone. "But the Under Armour ones are what the older boys wear," Mom argued. "Perception matters, Gerald. You know that." They didn't even look up when I walked in. I poured myself cereal and sat at the kitchen island, spoon clinking against the bowl. I waited for one of them to suddenly snap their fingers and gasp, "Oh my God, Linda!" Nothing. Hours crawled by. That afternoon, they dragged Cameron to 4 different sporting goods stores, treating the choice between Nike and Under Armour like a UN peace negotiation. I stayed home, watching cooking shows on the Food Network and pretending I didn't care. It wasn't until almost 9 that night, when I'd already brushed my teeth and put on my pajamas, that Mom's voice sliced through the hallway. "Oh my God, it's Linda's birthday." I heard the words from my bedroom doorway. Dad didn't even get up. He just looked away from his laptop and called out, "We'll get you something special next week, sweetheart. Promise." They never did. That's the thing about promises in my family. They were like wrapping paper, used once, then thrown away. When I was 12, Cameron made the varsity basketball team as a freshman. That, apparently, was an event for the history books. My parents rented a tent for the backyard, hired a catering company, and invited what felt like half of Scottsdale. There were fairy lights everywhere, trays of hors d'oeuvres I couldn't pronounce, and a professionally printed banner that said, "Congratulations, Cameron," in our school colors. That same year, I spent 4 months working on a science fair project about solar energy efficiency. Late nights with graphs and wires and poster boards. I loved it. It made me feel like I was building something that mattered. I won first place at regionals. I came home with the ribbon clutched in my hand, heart pounding. For a second, I thought, maybe this will be my moment. Mom glanced at the ribbon on her way past me in the hallway. "That's wonderful, honey," she said, already flipping through a notebook full of ideas for Cameron's high school graduation party, which, by the way, was still 3 years away. The ribbon ended up in the garage box. If birthdays and school achievements were small cuts, Christmas was the knife. I was 14 the first time it really hit me how replaceable I was. Christmas morning, I rolled out of bed expecting the usual tree, gifts, something that smelled vaguely like cinnamon. Instead, I walked outside and saw my parents loading suitcases into Dad's Mercedes. Cameron was already in the passenger seat, wearing clothes I didn't recognize. New jacket, tags still peeking out from the collar. "Where are you going?" I asked, standing in the driveway in my pajamas, the cold air biting my toes. "Miami," Mom said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't even bother to look guilty. "Cameron's been working incredibly hard. He deserves a real vacation." "What about me?" The words came out smaller than I wanted. Dad sighed, as if I were the unreasonable one. "Your Aunt Veronica will be here in an hour. You'll have a nice, quiet Christmas with her." Then they left. I spent Christmas with Aunt Veronica that year. She was the only one who ever made me feel like I took up the right amount of space. We baked gingerbread cookies that came out slightly lopsided, watched old holiday movies on her worn couch, and she never once mentioned Cameron's name. I loved her for that in a way I didn't know how to say yet. The next year, I tried not to hope. I really did. I was 15, and I'd started to understand that hoping in my family was like playing the lottery. You mostly just bought disappointment. Still, when I walked downstairs on Christmas morning, some stupid part of me expected things might be different. Cameron was already in the living room, surrounded by a mountain of wrapping paper and boxes. I watched him unwrap a brand new MacBook Pro. Not just any laptop, the top-of-the-line model everyone at school drooled over. Then came a leather bomber jacket, an expensive watch, concert tickets, and a pile of other gifts that looked like a highlight reel from an influencer's wish list. Finally, Mom handed me an envelope. Inside was a card. Just a card. It had a snowflake on the front and a generic printed "Merry Christmas" inside. No gift card, no money, nothing. I stared at the snowflake, then at Cameron's pile of luxury tech and designer labels. "This isn't fair," I said quietly. "Cameron gets all this, and I get a card." "Cameron is in college," Dad replied, as if that explained the laws of the universe. "These things are investments in his future. Don't be petty, Linda. It's not attractive to keep score of other people's gifts." I went back to my room and cried into my pillow, the card still in my hand. Later that day, Aunt Veronica called. I told her everything. She didn't try to make excuses for my parents. She just said, very softly, "I'm sorry, sweetheart." And I believed her, because she was the only one who ever sounded like she meant it. Christmas became predictable after that. Cameron got experiences and objects that screamed, "You matter." I got cards. Sometimes the message inside was a thinly veiled lecture about gratitude. One year they wrote, "Try not to compare yourself to your brother. It's not his fault he's accomplished." Eventually I told myself I'd stop caring. But that was a lie. I didn't stop caring. I just stopped showing it. When I turned 18 and got accepted to Arizona State University in Tempe, I packed my things and left. No big speech, no dramatic goodbye. I moved into the dorms, decorated my side of the room with cheap string lights, and decided that if my family wasn't going to treat me like I belonged, I'd build a life somewhere they didn't get to define me. I still called home about once a month, usually because Mom texted, "Why don't you ever check in?" The conversations felt like reruns. She'd spend 20 minutes talking about Cameron's internships, Cameron's grades, Cameron's new downtown apartment. Then she'd remember I existed. "How's school, Linda?" "Good. You'll never guess what Cameron's boss told him this week." And just like that, we were back in orbit around the sun. Even after I moved out, some stubborn part of me clung to the idea of Christmas. Not the reality I'd grown up with, but the fantasy. Twinkling lights, shared jokes, a family photo that didn't feel staged. So during my first year at Arizona State, I called Mom in early December. "I was thinking I'd come home for Christmas," I said. "I don't have any finals after the 18th, so I could stay for a week, maybe more." There was a long pause on the other end. "Actually, Linda, it might be better if you stayed at school this year," she said finally. "Maybe celebrate with your dorm friends. Cameron's fiance's family is coming over. It'll be a full house. You understand, right?" There were 5 bedrooms. I could picture every one of them. "Sure," I said, "I understand." But I went to Scottsdale anyway. I just didn't go home. I stayed with Aunt Veronica, and I didn't even drive past my parents' street. A few days later, I saw the photos on Mom's Instagram. Everyone gathered around the tree, dressed in coordinated outfits, holding champagne flutes. The caption read, "Our whole beloved family together for the holidays." I wasn't in a single photo. That was the year I stopped asking to be invited. I told myself it was better that way, but the ache in my chest every December said otherwise. After that Christmas, with the Instagram caption about their whole beloved family, something in me finally snapped. Quietly, but permanently. I stopped asking if I could come home. They stopped pretending to invite me. Instead, my life divided itself into two parallel tracks. There was the life I actually lived, the one with exams, roommates, late-night study sessions, and cheap takeout eaten on the floor. And then there was the life I watched from a distance, the one that played out through filtered photos and short captions on my phone. Their life. I graduated from Arizona State with honors 3 years later. There was no proud father in the audience, no mother dabbing at tears, no brother clapping too loudly when my name was called. Aunt Veronica was there, though. She wore her nicest dress, the one she usually saved for church, and she stood up and whistled when I walked across the stage. "You did that all by yourself," she said afterward, holding my shoulders. "Don't you ever let anyone tell you it doesn't matter." She took me out for lunch at a small diner off campus. We split a slice of pie, and she pressed a folded card into my hand. Inside was a handwritten note about how proud she was of me, and a check for $200. "It's not much," she said, "but it's from me, not from anyone else." I cried in the booth. Later that night, I checked the family group chat out of habit. Mom had posted a picture of Cameron at some work event, standing in front of a step-and-repeat backdrop, holding a glass of champagne. "So proud of our boy," her caption read. "He's destined for greatness." There was no mention of my graduation. I typed, "I graduated today," into the chat window. My thumbs hovered over send for a long moment. Then I erased it, locked my phone, and went back to packing up my dorm room. If they wanted to live in a world where I barely existed, I decided, I wouldn't force my way in. After college, I stayed in Phoenix. I got my first job at Zenith Brand Strategies, a mid-size marketing agency downtown, a place where the office furniture was cheap, the coffee was terrible, and everyone was underpaid but strangely proud of it. I started as a junior strategist, which basically meant staying late, doing endless research, cleaning up other people's slides, and praying the client wouldn't ask a question no one had prepared for. It was exhausting, and I loved it. At Zenith, nobody cared that my brother played varsity basketball in high school or that he had a BMW by 21. They didn't know that my science fair ribbon was crumpled in a box in some Scottsdale garage. All they cared about was whether my ideas worked. Did the campaign move numbers? Did the copy resonate? Did the deck land? I learned quickly. I stayed later. I volunteered for the projects other people didn't want. The weird ones, the complicated ones, the ones that required too many spreadsheets and too many late-night status updates. Every now and then, I'd drive past my parents' neighborhood on my way home, just to see the familiar turnoff. I never pulled in, but I always felt that tug in my chest, like muscle memory. At home, my connection to them shrank down to a rectangle on my phone. We had a Karishma family group chat. Mom, Dad, Cameron, and me. It should have been a lifeline. Instead, it was like watching a highlight reel of someone else's movie. Photo of Cameron at a charity gala. Photo of Cameron and his wife Vanessa at a wine tasting. Photo of my parents on a beach somewhere with the caption, "Celebrating our amazing son's promotion. He works so hard." Sometimes Mom would text me individually. "You never call anymore." When I did call, the conversation always went the same way. "How are things, Linda?" she'd ask. "Busy, but good. We just wrapped a..." "You would not believe what happened at Cameron's firm this week." She'd cut in. "His boss told him he's leadership material. They're talking about fast-tracking him to VP." I'd listen, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the ceiling of my tiny apartment while my own week, my own campaigns and wins and humiliations evaporated into silence. Eventually, I stopped volunteering information. It felt like shouting into a void. A few years passed like that. Long hours at Zenith, slow promotions, slightly nicer apartments, group chats filled with Cameron's milestones. During that time, Cameron got married. I found out the way I found out about most things in my family, through social media. Mom called me a few weeks before and said, "Cameron and Vanessa are having a very intimate ceremony, just close family." Something in me fluttered. "Oh, so, will you send me the details? I can take time off work." "There are only going to be a couple hundred people," she said. "It's extremely small. You understand, right?" I stared at my reflection in the black screen of my laptop. "A couple hundred," I repeated. "Exactly," she said, missing the point entirely. "It wouldn't make sense to complicate things." I laughed, but it came out sounding wrong. "Sure, Mom. Of course. Wouldn't want things to get complicated." The day of the wedding, I didn't get a call. I didn't get a text. I got photos posted later. Vanessa in a lace gown, Cameron in a tailored tux, my parents beaming in the front row, all bathed in golden hour light. The caption, the happiest day of our lives, our whole world in one room. I zoomed in on the background of the photos, searching for any sign that I had existed in their planning, even for a second. I didn't find one. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was busy. I had a deadline. I had my own life. But that night, standing in my dark kitchen with the glow of the refrigerator spilling across the tiles, I admitted the truth to myself. No matter how much distance I put between us, a piece of me was still that 10-year-old girl with cereal in her bowl and no one saying happy birthday. Time passed, and my career kept moving forward. After 3 years at Zenith, I got recruited by Apex Marketing Collective, one of the most prestigious firms in the Southwest. Their office was all glass walls and polished concrete, the kind of place where clients wore limited edition sneakers with their suits and said things like, "disrupt," with a straight face. When I got the offer, I sat in my car in the parking garage for 10 full minutes, staring at the number on the contract. It was more money than I'd ever made, more responsibility, real campaigns, real brands. I wanted to call someone, not a coworker, not a casual friend. I wanted to call family, the way I'd heard other people talk about doing. Tell my parents, hear my dad say, "I'm proud of you, kiddo." Hear my mom brag to someone in the background. That's my daughter. Instead, I opened the family group chat. There it was, the newest post from Mom. A photo of Cameron on a rooftop somewhere, his arm around Vanessa, city lights behind them. "So proud of our son, he just got another raise. He's unstoppable." Dad had replied, "You deserve all of this, Cameron. You've worked so hard." Cameron added a humble brag about just getting lucky, followed by a champagne emoji. I stared at the empty text field below all of that. "Hey, I just got hired at Apex Marketing Collective," I typed. It's kind of a big deal in my industry. I looked at the words, deleted them, retyped them, deleted them again. In the end, I locked my phone, tossed it onto the passenger seat, and drove home. At Apex, things were different. The workload was brutal, the expectations high, but the opportunities were real. I moved from junior strategist to leading my own campaigns faster than I'd thought possible. I started handling accounts that were actual household names, not just regional brands. No one at Apex knew anything about my family. They only knew the version of me that showed up early, stayed late, and didn't flinch when a client tore apart a proposal in a meeting. And little by little, I started to believe in that version too. But the split inside me never fully disappeared. On one side, Linda, the woman who was building something real, something that didn't depend on being anyone's daughter or sister. On the other, Linda, the girl who had never once been in a photo captioned "whole family." I thought I could carry both of them forever. I thought I could keep living my life, checking in on that group chat now and then, quietly swallowing whatever it made me feel. I was wrong, because one day a single message in that chat would land like a match in dry grass, and I wouldn't be able to pretend it didn't burn. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening, the kind of evening where you microwave leftovers, reply to client emails you shouldn't be replying to after 7 p.m., and tell yourself that tomorrow you'll go to bed earlier. I'd just wrapped a 6-month campaign for one of Apex's biggest clients, a major athletic apparel company trying to reinvent itself for Gen Z. It was the kind of project everyone wanted, but no one wanted to risk failing. I'd lived and breathed that campaign. Late nights, early mornings, grueling revisions, brutal feedback that sometimes left me sitting in bathroom stalls trying not to cry. And then the numbers came in. Sales jumped 42% in the first quarter alone. The CEO scheduled a meeting with me. His assistant emailed, "No deck needed, he just wants to talk." My stomach twisted with every elevator floor. He didn't make speeches. He wasn't sentimental. He looked at me across that glass-walled office and said, "You did something extraordinary. You're a force, Linda." Then he slid an envelope across his desk. Inside, a $95,000 bonus. For a long moment, all I could do was stare at it. My breath caught in my throat. My hands shook. $95,000. I walked to my car in a daze, sat behind the wheel, locked the doors, and cried. Not pretty crying, not soft crying. The kind of crying that comes from a wound you've been patching up for 31 years. When I finally breathed again, I looked at the number on the deposit confirmation screen. $95,000. I thought, I want to tell someone. I thought, I wish they cared. Later that night, I was lying on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, half watching some cooking show, with ridiculous background music when my phone buzzed. Family group chat. Dad had messaged me directly this time. Dad, why haven't you achieved anything significant in your career yet? You're 31, Linda. You should be doing more. I stared at the message. Then I stared at the bonus confirmation again. Then back at the message. Something broke. Not in a dramatic way. Not like glass shattering. It was quieter, like a thread snapping. I didn't reply. I closed the chat, opened my banking app again, just to prove to myself it wasn't a dream. Then put my phone face down and poured myself a glass of wine. For the first time in my life, I didn't want their approval. I wanted peace. I wanted a life that didn't feel like a punishment. So I did what any emotionally exhausted, sleep-deprived, 20-something with money for the first time ever woman might do. I opened a real estate app. Just to browse, just to look, just to imagine. I wasn't expecting anything, but then I saw it. A house tucked away in the mountains outside Flagstaff. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a wraparound deck overlooking ponderosa pines drenched in winter sun, huge windows, a stone fireplace that looked like it belonged in a movie, a kitchen with a window facing the mountains so you could cook while watching the light shift across the trees. The price, $375,000. My heart thudded once, loud, like it was trying to knock its way out of my chest. I clicked through the photos and clicked again and again. It was perfect. Calm, warm, safe. Everything my childhood home wasn't. Not an investment, not a rental, not for anyone else. Just for me. Before I could second guess myself, I called the listing agent. Her name was Denise. Cheerful, quick, with a voice that sounded like she practically lived on black coffee. Within minutes, she was FaceTiming me, walking through the house. The living room was drenched in sunset light. The kitchen and cabinets were ugly, but fixable. The bedrooms were small, but cozy. The deck made me breathless. I want it, I said. Denise blinked. You want to think about it? Maybe sleep on it? No, I said. How fast can we move? She laughed. I like you. We started the paperwork that night. I transferred the deposit the next morning. 3 weeks later, 3 weeks before Christmas, I drove up alone to sign the final documents. When Denise handed me the keys, I walked into the empty living room and stopped. Silence. Real silence. The kind that wraps around you like a blanket instead of suffocating you. This house was mine. Mine! The next 3 weeks were a blur of late-night furniture assembly, painting kitchen cabinets sage green, replacing outdated fixtures, choosing rugs, hanging curtains, and unboxing packages until my hallway looked like an Amazon warehouse. I worked on the house in the evenings after Apex, all day on weekends, sometimes until 2 in the morning. I've never been happier. By December 20th, the house looked incredible, warm, inviting, alive. I took photos, wide shots of the living room, close-ups of the fireplace, a dreamy shot of the deck with snow-dusted trees behind it, and posted them on Instagram. My caption was simple. I deserve my own house. Best Christmas gift I could ask for. An hour later, my phone exploded. Mom, whose house is that? Where did you get the money? Dad, call us immediately. Cameron, what's going on? I read every message, smiled, and didn't respond. An hour later, Mom, family dinner, December 22nd. 7:00 p.m. This is not optional. I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it. The other part? The hurt part. The part that remembered every ignored birthday, every empty Christmas, every Instagram caption, wanted to see their faces when they finally realized they didn't know me at all. So I decided to go. Not because I owed them anything, but because, for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking into that house as the invisible daughter. I was walking in as the woman who built something of her own, and they weren't ready for that. December 22nd. I parked a few houses down from my parents' Scottsdale home, partly out of habit, partly because I didn't want my car blocking the driveway like I was some dutiful daughter returning on cue. The desert air was cold, unusually sharp for Arizona, and I stood on the sidewalk for a moment just breathing, steadying myself. I wasn't scared. I was ready. I rang the doorbell. Dad opened the door almost immediately, like he'd been standing right behind it, waiting. He didn't smile, didn't say hello. His jaw was tight, eyes narrowed in a familiar mix of disappointment and authority. Living room, now. That was it. No hug, no how have you been, just an order. I walked inside. Mom and Cameron were already seated on the couch, Cameron with his arms crossed, Mom with a tissue in hand, her eyes red in that performative, careful way she'd perfected over the years. I sat in the single armchair across from them, the interrogation chair, the chair where you were meant to explain yourself. Dad didn't sit. He stayed standing, arms folded across his chest, looming like a judge. "Whose house is that?" he demanded. I let the question hang for a second. It tasted bitterly familiar, the tone parents use when you've broken something precious, even though nothing in that house had ever been mine. Then I smiled. "It's my house," I said. "I bought it." 4 stunned faces. Mom's mouth actually fell open. Cameron blinked like he didn't understand the words. Dad's frown deepened. "That's impossible," Mom said. "You can't earn that kind of money. You're just a manager or assistant, whatever it is you do." I almost laughed. If they had asked, even once in the last decade, they would have known everything. But they hadn't. "If any of you cared enough to check in on my life," I said calmly, "you'd know I work at Apex Marketing Collective. I lead campaigns, big ones, successful ones. My latest one increased client sales by 42% in 1 quarter." Silence. "And I got a $95,000 bonus for that project," I continued. "That's how I bought the house. That's how I renovated it, all on my own." Mom stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. "That's not true," she whispered. "You would have told us." I raised an eyebrow. "Would I?" Dad finally sat down, slowly, like his knees had suddenly weakened. "You should have consulted us before making such a large purchase," Cameron said, voice tight. "It's irresponsible. You can't just make financial decisions without family input." I genuinely laughed this time. "What's funny?" Cameron snapped. "You," I said. "You thinking I need your permission to spend my own money." His face reddened. Mom jumped in. "This attitude of yours," she said, "is exactly why we're having this conversation. You've become selfish, Linda. That house is too big for one person. We should all spend Christmas there this year." "No," I said. "I'm not hosting Christmas." Cameron leaned forward. "Vanessa's pregnant." My stomach dropped. He said it like it was a sacred trump card. "She's been dreaming about a house like that," he continued. "It would be perfect for us, especially with the baby coming. You should let us stay there." I stared at him. "You want to live in my house?" I said. Cameron nodded. "Just until after the baby's born. Maybe 6 months or so." Mom wiped imaginary tears. "It makes sense, Linda. You have all that space. And you're alone. They need a real home to start their family. This is what family does. They support each other." Family. The word felt like a joke. "When," I asked, "have any of you ever supported me?" Dad's voice sharpened. "We raised you. We gave you everything." I shook my head. "No. You gave Cameron everything. You gave me cards at Christmas. Cards telling me not to compare myself to him." "That's not fair," Mom said weakly. "Really?" I said. "You forgot my 10th birthday because you were buying him basketball shoes. You took him to Miami for Christmas and left me with Aunt Veronica. You gave him a BMW, trips to London. And me? A snowflake card." No one spoke. The room had that strange, heavy silence. The kind that comes when truth lands harder than anyone expected. Dad stood again, like rising gave him authority. "If you want to repair this family," he said, voice cold, "you will host Christmas at your new house, and you will let your brother and his pregnant wife stay there, rent-free, for as long as they need." I looked at each of them. Mom with her trembling lip, Dad with his righteous indignation, Cameron with entitlement radiating off him like heat. And I saw it clearly, not for the first time, but in a way that finally cut clean through every old wound. I didn't need them. I never had. "You didn't invite me to Thanksgiving," I said softly. "You didn't invite me to Christmas. You haven't included me in anything in over a decade, and now you want to use what I built. My house, my space, my peace." I shook my head. "No, I'm done." I stood. Dad's voice boomed. "Linda, if you walk out that door, you are cutting ties with this family." I paused at the doorway, looked back one last time. "You cut ties with me years ago," I said. "You just never noticed, because you were too busy worshiping Cameron." I walked out. Their voices rose behind me, calling my name, demanding I return, blaming me for their own choices. I didn't stop. Outside, the night air hit my face like a release. I got into my car, shut the door, and exhaled. A breath I felt like I'd been holding since childhood. My phone started ringing immediately. Mom, Dad, Cameron, all of them calling. I blocked every number, deleted the family group chat. Then I called my friends. "You want to spend Christmas in a mountain house?" I asked. Within an hour, 18 people said yes. On Christmas Eve, my house was full of laughter, real laughter. Friends cooking, cousins dancing in the kitchen, music filling corners that had only recently been empty. We sat by the fireplace, played board games, and stayed up until dawn. I took photos, genuine, unfiltered, happy, and posted them. Mom commented, "Nice to see you've forgotten your real family. So proud of your career that you've abandoned the people who raised you." I laughed, didn't reply, didn't feel guilty, not even a little. New Year's Eve, I drove to pick up Aunt Veronica. She didn't ask where we were going until we hit the highway. "My house," I said, "the one in the pictures." She smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." When she stepped inside, she walked through every room slowly, touching the counters, the curtains, the backs of chairs like she was blessing them. Then she sat on the couch and patted the spot beside her. "Your parents called me," she said gently. "Asked me to talk sense into you." My chest tightened. "What did you tell them?" "That they've been ignoring you for 30 years, she said, "and they should leave you alone." I closed my eyes. Her words wrapped around something fragile inside me and repaired it without ceremony. Aunt Veronica continued, "I also told them not to bother me with their nonsense again." I hugged her. She hugged me back. A year passed after that, a quiet, steady year. I kept working at Apex. Got another promotion in July. My apartment in Phoenix stayed practical, but my mountain house became my sanctuary. Most weekends I drove up there, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends, always with peace. My parents still posted photos, still captioned them with words like blessed and family, still pretended the hole in their lives didn't have my shape. I didn't care. What I had was better. A life I chose, a home I built, love that didn't demand I shrink myself. People sometimes ask if I miss them. I tell them the truth. You can't miss something you never truly had. Peace is better. Freedom is better. And for the first time in my life, so am I.